The tools that we use to fight our battles will determine whether or not we come out victorious in the battles that we are presently facing. When it comes to spiritual warfare, we cannot use the weapons of the flesh to fight in a spiritual warfare. And this is why 2 Corinthians chapter 10 verse 4 to 6 says, "For the weapons of our warfare, they are not carnal." So fighting this spiritual warfare as the children of God, we do not utilize carnal weapons, because carnal weapons are the things of the flesh, and the things of the flesh will not gain us the victory in our spiritual warfare that we are fighting, because carnal weapons only goes to serve and to strengthen the carnal nature. Spiritual weapons, beloved, they strengthen the spiritual nature and they give us victories in this spiritual warfare. So we are told that the weapons of our warfare, they are not carnal. We do not utilize carnal means. We cannot fight the battles of the Lord by using the tools of the devil. Let me repeat that. We cannot fight the battles of the Lord by using the tools of the devil. So the weapons of our warfare, they are not carnal, but they are mighty through God. So the weapons that God has given us to use, they are not carnal, they are not the things of the flesh, but they are mighty through Him. And so when we understand what these weapons are, we can be able to utilize them. But if we utilize these spiritual weapons in our own strength and not through God and not through the strength of God, we are not going to gain a complete and a total victory. We can win a battle but lose the war. So we must understand that the spiritual weapons that God has furnished to us from His word and from a relationship with Him and from walking in the Spirit, they must be used in His strength, in His way, and under His guidance and His direction, beloved. So they are mighty with the help of God. They are not mighty in our own strength. They are mighty in God's strength. In our own strength, they can be effective, but with God's strength, they are mighty to the pulling down of strongholds. And strongholds are the vices, are the things that in our life seem impregnable, are the things that are in society that seem impregnable, where the devil still maintains power, even though you try to wash it out and cleanse it out, even though you try to change it out or shift it out or move it out. It is a stronghold. It remains there. It is deeply rooted and grounded within the very nature of the person, within the very nature of the thing. So understanding what spiritual weapons are, we recognize that it is only through the help of God, the direction of God, the guidance of God, the power of God, the strategy of God, that we can pull down strongholds in our life, and we can see strongholds pulled down in society as well. So when we understand what these spiritual weapons are, we can see that they're things that we can utilize and they can be effective in our lives. But when we understand what they really are and how much we need the help of God, we're going to take the effectiveness of spiritual weapons and apply them in God's strength to pull down strongholds. And we do need strongholds to be pulled down in our life, where when we understand the weapon and the nature of the stronghold and we go to God, He can show us a systematic way to pull down the walls of Jericho in our life. And so from verse 5, we are told that these weapons of our warfare, these spiritual weapons, they cast down imaginations. And this is quite important, beloved, because we must understand the power and the force of our imagination. Because in Genesis chapter 11 and verse 6, God said, and the Lord said, behold, the people is one. This is regarding the building of the Tower of Babel. The people is one, and they have all one language. And this they begin to do. And now nothing will be restrained from them, which they have imagined to do. So God himself highlights the power, the reach, the scope, the effectiveness of imagination. That when we imagine wickedness, and according to Genesis chapter 6, as it relates to the flood, where God told Noah that the imagination of the thoughts of man's heart was only wickedly continually, when what we imagine we do, and when our imagination is corrupt, our lives are corrupt, the entire world will be corrupt. And so when it comes to spiritual warfare, when it comes to spiritual weapons used as God designed them to use, they have the power to cast down imaginations and every high thing that exalteth itself against the knowledge of God. And those high things that exalt themselves against the knowledge of God are those things that purport themselves to be more important than having a knowledge of God. And having a knowledge of God is not simply knowing about God. Having a knowledge of God is having a cause and effect relationship in obedience to God and understanding the blessedness that comes from obedience, where you know that when you obey God, you cannot lose. You are never losing. When you know that when you obey God and follow his directions and his steps, you cannot be put to shame, and you never will be put to shame. So the weapons of our warfare, they cast down imaginations, which is the root of creativity, which is the root of production, which is the root of creating a new world from your mind and forming and shaping a new society, beloved. So the spiritual weapons, they cast down imaginations and every high thing that exalteth itself against the knowledge of God. And guess what else it does? Guess what else they do? They bring into captivity every thought to the obedience to Christ. In other words, the weapons of our warfare that are not carnal, they help us to reform and rehabilitate the stray and the random thoughts that we have on a daily basis that tend to wreak havoc upon our faith and upon our confidence in God. You are about your business on your way, then all of a sudden a thought pops into your head. And so the weapons of our warfare, they curtail those stray and random wild thoughts that cause you to needlessly doubt God's love towards you, and to doubt the promises contained in his word, and to doubt his power working on your behalf. So the understanding and the application of the weapons of our spiritual warfare helps to bring captive the thoughts that occur in your mind that are against you being fully and totally on the side of Christ. And it continues to say, and having in a readiness to revenge all disobedience when your obedience is fulfilled. And this is something that we have to understand. When your obedience is fulfilled, the weapons of our warfare is having an experience in obeying God and seeing the blessed results of obedience. And this is how we revenge disobedience, by showing that there is a blessing to obedience, regardless of how hard the path may be, that you maintain your integrity. Beloved, these are the weapons of our warfare. This is what the weapon of our warfare does, that gives us victory in this battle for our life and for our spiritual existence. And from here on in, we are going to make an active investigation of what the weapons of our warfare are, that we may be able to use them as skillful soldiers of Christ. This is the Word of Life with Andre Knight.